welcome back to the Comics Alliance podcast, presented by ComicsAlliance.com, your source for comic book entertainment culture, news, humor, and commentary. I'm Andy Corey, senior editor of ComicsAlliance.com. The big story of the week is the acquisition of leading digital comics retailer ComiXology by Amazon.com. ComiXology has facilitated over 200 million downloads of digital comics, making it the largest provider of American comic books from nearly every major publisher, as well as smaller press and independent creators. Amazon.com is one of, if not the biggest retailers of, well, everything in the world, including a leading seller of digital content in the form of music, video, and electronic books. What does this acquisition mean for ComiXology and the American comic book industry as a whole? To address these questions and ask even more, I'm joined this week by Heidi McDonald, editor-in-chief of comics news and culture site The Beat, Matt D. Wilson, Comics Alliance contributor and writer of the digital comic book Copernicus Jones, Robot Detective, and Allison Baker and Chris Robertson, publishers of Monkey Brain Comics, an imprint with an exclusive digital distribution deal with ComiXology. Obviously, the first question on everyone's minds is, what does this mean for the comic book industry? What does it mean for ComiXology's existing customers? Because that is really beyond my realm of understanding. I'm going to talk to someone who is very adept at this subject, which is Heidi McDonald from The Beat. Heidi McDonald, what was your first reaction to this news?
Well, my first reaction was, that shoe dropped. It wasn't really a surprise. Everyone knew. Last fall, ComiXology had a meeting in its office where they unveiled a lot of digital stats. They're talking about new customers and so on, and they invited a lot of tech journalists and comics journalists, and it was very obviously the kind of thing you do when you're showing yourself off. You're parading around saying, please buy me. And so it wasn't a surprise at all, because that's kind of what you do. That's what you do when you develop a digital business. You want to be acquired. It's like, remember Pets.com? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, that was it. And I've been talking to a lot of people about it recently, and I guess the biggest I think reactions ranged from the shock factor, or not shock. No one was shocked, but the oh yeah, okay, good. Amazon is in the comics business now. To what will happen to my files? So I think there's a lot of concern just about how this will play out, obviously, given Amazon sometimes very aggressive tactics about pricing.
Yes, and to what you were just saying about ComiXology's recent successes, they have claimed to have sold over 200 million digital comics since starting up in 2007, which would make them, I think, the biggest comic book retailer in the world.
Yeah. Well, one thing, they always say they download, so that not sold. That includes like free comics that they give away as well. So it's important to know.
That's an important distinction. Mm-hmm. And they are the top grossing, according to Apple, the top grossing application for the iPad that is not a game.
Right, correct.
So that seems like quite a bit, as even before Amazon's involvement, this seems like, on paper, quite a big deal for comic books in terms of sales and audience. How do you think Amazon's involvement conceivably enhance the situation for comics?
Okay, well, I think you're absolutely right, and ComiXology's importance to Apple. I mean, Apple was very much aware of the importance of ComiXology and of the money that they were making, and it definitely put digital comics on Apple's radar.
We should just say before you go on, for those who don't know how it works with Apple, is that purchases of comics made within ComiXology's app for the iPad and iPhone and so forth. Like everything in that marketplace, a portion of the sale of each product does go to Apple,
yes,
as opposed to ComiXology's, web interface, which is does not go through the iOS marketplace.
Right, and
so Apple's in the comics business via ComiXology to the tune of 200 million downloads.
Right. Because people like farting around on their iPad. They like farting around on their iPhone, and ComiXology also had guided view, which is a special panel to panel transition that makes even larger panels pretty easy to read on your tablet device. Anyway, yeah, I just to getting back to what I was saying is that definitely the success of ComiXology's digital comic sales had gotten on the radar of Apple and definitely gotten on the radar of Amazon as well. And Amazon was selling digital comics with their own guided view a few years ago. They actually had kind of made a run at being their own ComiXology, something that I guess that happened maybe 2 years ago. And it's worth noting now because I think that might have been the first thing that was like, oh well, if you can't lick it, then just buy it. So yeah, I think it's very good. I mean, I think one of the I did write a post about this for my own site, The Beat, and I looked at Audible, which is a company that sold audiobooks that was acquired by Amazon a few years ago. And I think we probably will see something very like the Audible rollout with how ComiXology is handled.
Well, is Audible integrated in Amazon in a very meaningful way, or is it sort of a separate entity?
It's totally integrated into Amazon. Now, it is its own standalone thing where you go onto Audible and you can browse audiobooks and so on. But you see Amazon customer ratings. You see, you log in with your Amazon customer password, and then it's sort of like an audio devoted site and platform, but it's completely powered by Amazon's own engines. Now, I'm not familiar with how Audible was powered before, or what kind of technology they brought to audiobooks that might be comparable to ComiXology. But obviously, I will say, all props to ComiXology. I mean, none of this is, I think we should all really doff our hats to David Steinberger, John Roberts, and the rest of the crew because they handled it so well. But they also invested a lot in technology. So with guided view. So, I mean, they have a pretty robust platform for reading comics. I think where Amazon will come in is that the discoverability on ComiXology was not that great. You could browse by publisher, but if you downloaded, I was just writing about the LA Times book prizes were given out last night, and Uli Luss, the Last Day of the Rest of Your Life, won for graphic novel. So suppose you want to download that electronically. If you were doing it on Amazon, it would then say, oh, you might like this book and that book and 10 other books. Like you might like Go Over Easy by Mimi Pond, or you might like Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. Whereas in ComiXology, you don't quite have that kind of, if you like this, you should buy that sort of thing that Amazon excels at.
Right. Amazon has mastered the upsell. There's no question about that. Back to the Apple question really quick.
Sure.
I think it's fair to say the relationship between Apple and Amazon is not great.
Right.
And notably, you cannot actually buy Kindle products, which are Amazon ebooks, in the Kindle app.
Right.
Could in-app purchases in ComiXology be similarly endangered? I would think not, because ComiXology's big claim to fame is, besides the guided view technology, which is very robust and very good, is that it came closest of all the sort of digital comic startups to realizing that, great dream of becoming the iTunes of comics.
Right. I'm not as much of a criminologist on hostilities between Apple and Amazon as I should be, to be honest. That's probably really a major field of study right now, and probably a very profitable one going forward. So I don't know. I don't know how much Amazon's dislike of giving Apple 30% of each sale would be for digital comics. I will say that, we're still not 200 million units is a lot. I mean, but we're still not looking at massive, video game like sales here. I mean, we're still talking about a fairly niche product in a way. And so I don't know, I mean, this is just me pure blue sky speculating, I mean, Amazon might want that 30 cents, they might want to capture all of that. And I mean, it works for Kindle, obviously. I mean, let's put it this way, Andy. Consumers do not have qualms about going on Amazon and buying things. I mean,
Hmm.
that is, that is not a problem for anywhere, any place, anytime. So, I mean, actually buying things through Amazon, if that were the mechanism, would not necessarily be an issue. I think keeping digital comics, I think discoverability is the thing. I think they wanted. I think they need to be. Like I said, I'm suspecting as with Audible, that you'll have your own portal. You'll have your own way to find them and to buy them. And so I mean, it might not that in that way. Perhaps Amazon will keep the ComiXology app standing alone, and we'll let Apple take its piece of the pie.
I suppose it must for the Amazon iOS app, where you can make
Right.
purchases through that. So
Right.
maybe
Right.
it's not that big a deal. Maybe the Kindle thing is just a bit conspicuous.
Right.
It's like they're saying you're not getting any of our digital book sales.
Right.
This is very interesting for me to see, because I began my digital career, as it were, in the music download business, working for a Sony company that was sort of emulating iTunes. And I have to say that what comics has done since, observing how the music business completely just, ate shit on
Right. Right.
the download business is quite ahead of the curve in that way. But now there are already comic books on Amazon, like there are every other kind of book. And I don't know, Heidi, are those books purchased by Amazon from Diamond, or are they from the larger book distribution apparatus?
I think a lot of them go through Diamond. That's a very good question that I've heard. I think in general they go through the book distributor. So I think if a book is distributed through Diamond, they would go through Diamond Book Services. I don't think they go through Diamond's direct market, as cheap as that would be. So, but Amazon buys in such bulk that really isn't an issue with them. So,
well, I ask because I don't know that we have sales numbers for the number of comic books, and when we say comic books with respect to Amazon, we're talking about graphic novels, because
yes.
they don't sell periodicals.
Well, they do. They actually, you'll find a lot of periodicals scattered around on Amazon, actually.
Sold by Amazon itself, or by Amazon Marketplace sellers?
I'm not sure. I think it's sold by Marketplace sellers, but I mean, you'll find everything on Amazon, So, I mean, if you, like I said, the searchability, the discoverability element is huge on there. And I mean, Amazon sells digital comics already. I mean, I have been running sales charts for Amazon's Kindle books, and DC's Injustice Among Us, based on the video game, has been a huge seller actually on the Kindle platform. So, or through the digital, Amazon's digital portal. So,
but I wonder, we have every published trade paperback and graphic novel on Amazon already,
yes.
And I don't really know that that's been a huge game changer for comics. Would ComiXology being folded in make that much of a difference, really? Everyone in comics, our big prevailing sort of mantra is how to get more people reading comics.
Right.
And one of the things we've talked about on this podcast before is there comes a saturation point with respect to some comics. For example, we sort of discussed the idea that the Avengers and Batman, all these things, are the most popular films that we make in America. That's
right.
And yet, the Batman and Avengers comics are not selling that much more than they used to. So people are sort of decided, I'm getting all the Avengers and Batman comics I want.
Right.
I'm getting all that content I want.
Right.
But with all this material now available on Amazon, could this be the sort of the magic beans?
Well, we have the magic beans. I think the problem with this is, and I'm, no disrespect to Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, who do a great job on the Batman books. But I think Avengers is a huge movie because movies are really great at showing people flying through the sky and blasting each other with lasers. That's a really amazing thing when you go to the movies and it looks great and you really enjoy it. Comics are good at that in a way, but I think what comics are really great at is other kinds of storytelling, and that is a little bit more actually. Yeah, this is really strange that I'm saying this, but if you look at the best-selling comics of all time, they're actually humor comics like Peanuts and Garfield and all that. And even like aside from manga, where One Piece is the best-selling comic, but even One Piece is a hugely humorous kind of element to it. So I think what really needs to be done is people need to say, guess what? What are comics really awesome at? And why do people really like reading them? It's like you can give anyone bone and they will read it. Or I mean, there's certain books that certain comics that anybody can read. So I mean, I don't think it's necessarily that, Batman is have we reached the saturation point? Well, maybe, but in that kind of storytelling, maybe that's the kind of story that isn't maybe. Maybe we really need to think about this. Like, what kind of comics do more people actually like and read? So yeah, I mean, I do think, I keep saying this: where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, the fact that Amazon purchased ComiXology. If you look at Amazon's like Wikipedia page as I did, I mean, they have like huge number of comic companies that they've acquired over the years. And some of them were clearly like, did this little piece of technology or that little piece of technology. And some of them were more like Zappos or Audible, or, were more like, oh, here's a discrete piece of business and we want to take that over.
Right. Zappos in particular, I think I didn't even know before I read your article that they owned that company.
Right.
It is such a distinct brand with such robust business.
Right.
But it makes sense that it would work out the way it does because Amazon has this unmatched shipping infrastructure for shipping physical products around the world.
Right.
And Zappos, for people who don't know, is a shoe retailer.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love Zappos. Who doesn't? Yeah. So I mean, I mean, there's all sorts of different. We're just 3 days into this new world order, and I think there's a lot of anxiety because Amazon, like I said, Amazon can be very aggressive. They can be very they want their 30 cents, they want their penny, they want their 2 cents, and they're not afraid to take a loss on something in order to corner a market. They're too big to fail. And I think comic shops, I mean, we saw a statement come out from Comics Pro, the retailer organization, that was a little bit defensive, I think, and I pointed to some other things where ComiXology actually started out doing pull lists for retailers, where they offered like this digitized pull list for people, and a lot of retailers signed up for it, and now they're like, oh great, now Amazon has my customer list.
Well, also just like even worse, ComiXology, and I say worse in quotes, ComiXology offered retailers a digital storefront option where,
yes,
if you visit, what that means for people who don't know is, let's say you go to your local comic book store's website and they have on their sidebar or the top or some menu item that says, you can buy your comics from us digitally if you like. Mm-hmm. And what that basically means is ComiXology is sort of mapped over their site, kind of like an Amazon widget on some websites that you might know. That's kind of interesting. And you'll get your local comic store will get a piece of that digital comics purchase. Now Amazon's going to get that, share the money. Now Amazon is sharing the money with the brick and mortar stores, and Amazon is popularly perceived as wanting to destroy every brick and mortar store of every type. Right.
Well, going back to your own experience in the music industry, I had an interesting conversation with this think tank guy a few years ago, and he pointed out that, when digital came in, the music industry guys were like, these macho men swinging all their wallets around. And they were like, over our dead body, you will not do this. And, they fought and lost. The movie guys the same, macho hardliners, and also they failed. The book publishers, and comics people, we're kind of going down the list of people who are self-made loudmouths, like with giant expense accounts, Lord of the Universe. So I mean, they sort of were like, I don't know, maybe a little smarter and kind of were like digital. Okay, let's see, and they've survived a little bit more. I mean, obviously, bookstores are endangered, and yet we have again. I keep saying this. Comic shops are the last man standing. These are the only independent. This is the largest network of independent bookstores of any kind in the United States and probably the world. I mean, it's unique among all venues. Tower Records is gone, J&R is gone, everyone is gone, and comic shops are still here.
Right.
So
and they make their money, obviously.
And they do. And
with such a small, relatively small customer base too.
Exactly.
It's remarkable. It's notable that in comic books there is quite a lot of digital, what we call digital first and digital exclusive content, which is sold through ComiXology, notably the Monkey Brain Comics imprint, which is created and managed by Chris Roberson and Allison Baker, who join us now, along with ComicsAlliance contributor Matt D. Wilson, who, besides writing great content for ComicsAlliance.com, is the writer of Copernicus Jones' Robot Detective for Monkey Brain. Everybody, Monkey Brainers, what was your initial reaction when you heard that Amazon would be acquiring the company that exclusively distributes your material?
Well, Allison documented her reaction in a selfie. She was on a school bus on a field trip with our daughter. So you can go on Twitters and see what her reaction looked like. We had no idea it was coming.
Yeah. I don't know why we didn't know, but we didn't. So.
We didn't know. We were out of the loop. I think I heard it as a rumor and then just dismissed it as one of those rumors that you hear.
When was your reaction besides the surprise? Was it this is a good thing for us, or this is
more like a more substantive rather than just are we surprised or not?
I mean, we'll put the selfie in the show notes. Don't worry about it.
It's a good one.
We'll make sure it's there.
She's an attractive lady.
I'm adorable.
Yes.
So honestly, it's interesting because our first reaction was that it's a positive overall for everybody involved. ComiXology, we first partnered with them a few years ago because we could see that they were going to become the market leader in digital comics distribution. And that's when the field was fairly crowded. And the reason that we decided that is that they had spent so much time trying to figure out how to make reading digital comics on any platform as smooth and pleasurable a process as possible, whether it was on a computer screen or a tablet or a phone. And really, it's their ongoing improvements to guided view and the page-to-page navigation and full page mode and things like that have made it a really good reading experience. I think that's the one thing that they have to offer over their competitors who have gone by the wayside. But the one thing that they haven't been able to do as well is a lot of kind of back-end database stuff that we've been suggesting improvements they could make since the beginning. Things like the way Amazon handles things.
Well, the nesting of books.
Well, nesting of things, but also the recommending based on your past purchasing and reading history what you might like next. So that like when readers would go to their site or open the app, rather than getting the barrage of top sellers in the direct market, maybe if you only like the indie stuff or only like romance comics, you don't like horror comics, that it would front load things like that and suggest those to you instead. And we have politely but persistently made those kinds of suggestions to ComiXology since the beginning. And they have done their best, but they haven't been able to implement all of our suggestions. But that's really the main thing that Amazon has to offer as their strength since the beginning, is the strength of their algorithms and their ability to anticipate what customers are going to like next or what they might be interested in next.
So we were excited because we felt that, what Amazon does really well and what ComiXology does really well, you put those two things together and you have a huge thing for comics in general, reaching outside the direct market and into the the wider realm.
That's right, because Amazon is literally everywhere. They have a reach that far exceeds even what ComiXology's been able to accomplish in the last few years.
Because I think that what ComiXology has done is that they have brand recognition that's very significant in the comics market. But what they were at this point in time, what they really needed to do was do a reach outside of that market to gain new readers. And I think that this is just a win-win for everybody.
And in my previous life, I was a science fiction and fantasy novelist, and so we have a little bit of insight from the other side, because I published a novel through one of Amazon's imprints, available both in print and on Kindle, and getting the monthly sales figures on that book
and the monthly money.
Yeah, that book in the Kindle edition continues to sell in healthy numbers, like every month, for years now. And it's just because it's available. Even if most readers despise it, people keep buying it. And I just think that, like, putting digital comics in a place where lots and lots of people all over the planet go to buy the things they want anyway can't do anything but help everybody in the end.
Now, this assumes that Amazon will integrate ComiXology in some very technical and meaningful way with respect to the user experience. Matt Wilson, do you think that is likely, or will ComiXology remain sort of isolated and just owned by Amazon?
All we know at the moment is that ComiXology will retain its branding. That was part of David Steinberger's original letter the day that this was announced. This merger or acquisition was announced. He made sure to note in his letter that basically that ComiXology is not becoming Amazon Comics. It's going to remain ComiXology. You could possibly assume from that ComiXology will retain some autonomy away from Amazon. But one thing that I think you learn pretty quickly when it comes to particularly tech acquisitions is that things that retain their identity initially often get folded into the bigger brand eventually.
Would that not be better in the long run? Because as Chris and Allison were just saying, that ComiXology had sort of reached a ceiling with respect to its current crowd, its current market, and going to Amazon makes sense because Amazon has a much bigger one. But if ComiXology is just going to remain ComiXology, what's the point?
That's a good question. Unless Amazon figures out some kind of way to brand ComiXology, keep that branding and yet, keep comics or make ComiXology sort of a bigger part of Amazon under the Amazon umbrella under that name. I think for me, reaction-wise, my reaction is much what we're doing right now, which is just asking questions as to what this means. Because it's this thing where we didn't get a ton of information when it was announced. We haven't gotten
any information, really, Matt.
We got that Amazon had bought ComiXology. It will be completed by the end of the second quarter, so by the end of June, and that was pretty much it. And so, my questions aren't even necessarily as a comics creator, because I wear a lot of hats, so all those different parts of me ask different questions. The creator part of me asks the question, what does this mean for creator compensation? Or what creators ultimately get from the sales of their comics? And then, what kind of restrictions will there be, if any? Or how will the relationship with Apple change? That's one thing I've been seeing discussed a lot, because Amazon and Apple are such strong competitors. The Amazon Kindle store on iOS, doesn't do in-app purchases because they don't want to give that kickback to Apple. That's a big question. The reporter side of me wants to ask a ton of questions about what's going to happen as far as, lots of different business aspects of it, the branding stuff we just talked about, all of that. And then there's a reader part of me that has a ton of questions about what this is going to mean for the ComiXology comics library that I own, because I don't actually own it.
For people who don't understand how that works, maybe give them a little primer in how ComiXology works on the iPad and on the web.
Well, basically, all your comics, you don't download them directly to your device. They're kept in a library in the cloud. And conceivably, I don't know of any instances of this happening, but one thing that people fret about buying digital comics through ComiXology is that conceivably they could take those comics away. Or somebody could decide that these comics are no longer available on ComiXology and no longer available in your library. Amazon has a very similar system when it comes to certain Kindle books or certain other digital properties,
like video. This is very typical of the, I suppose you could say, like Web 3.0, where the file system, whereby you actually download and manipulate with a mouse files with little extensions and move them around into different apps, is really going away, and everything is becoming a sort of mobile app-based user experience where you don't even need to see where things are. The content is just delivered into you, kind of by magic.
Well, it's a thing where there's been all this talk about physical media going away, but another thing that seems to be kind of slowly going away is even like the download of media onto a device. It's that media just exists in the cloud, and we all kind of share it. Like, we pay a fee to share it. So that raises some questions. So for me, I don't even. My reaction was, how do I react to this? Because there's so many variables, there's so many unknowns, there's so many things that are going to have to come to light, that are going to have to be explained before I can formulate a reaction.
I wonder, getting back to the branding question, because they did make a point of saying ComiXology will retain its branding, and I just wonder, in the context of getting millions and millions of comics out to Amazon customers, if this is indeed like the goal, how valuable is ComiXology's brand? Like, wouldn't it be better to fold its infrastructure into the Amazon pages that we all look at every day? Or should it remain a separate store with a separate app with a separate identity that Amazon just sort of takes a cut of because it's doing good business, kind of like Zappos, which Heidi and I mentioned before, which is the shoe retailer that Amazon is, from all appearances, pretty hands-off of?
I see advantages to either way. I think that, ComiXology has really dominated that part of the direct market that has decided to migrate, at least in part, to digital. And something that Alice and I have been discussing for a while is the fact that, that outreach work is done. There are very few people inside the direct market who are not aware of the fact that ComiXology exists. And it's a very recognizable brand. That equals digital comics for most direct market readers, I think.
Yeah, just to jump back in for 1 second, I mean, it's a very trusted brand. ComiXology has a very good reputation. So, which is of value.
But, outside that direct market, I don't think people care about those kinds of brands. I think people want the content, or they don't even know they want the content yet.
And I think it's as simple as, a link. It's like, this is where comics is from the Amazon site. I don't know that it's...
Yeah. But I think that one thing that Amazon really wants, I think it was Christian Lipsky on a Facebook comment the other day. I say the other day, it was probably yesterday and the day before, that guided view is what the Kindle has lacked for making comics really readable. Because with the different sizes of the Kindle, a full page comic isn't really feasible on a smaller size. But if you are able to integrate the guided view apparatus into the Kindle, it makes it a much more attractive proposition.
I mean, I think that in the end, and I think it's going to take time, but I think in the end, I think, the consumer experience is going to be a much more positive one, which is really kind of nice, since we put so much on the consumer in comics. I think it's going to be kind of refreshing for them to be able to easily access comics.
I wonder if Amazon's not going to try to have it both ways and keep the ComiXology brand, but also inject ComiXology's system or platform into a broader, like under the broader Kindle umbrella as well. Because I think the risk of taking away ComiXology's branding or folding that store into the bigger Amazon apparatus is that you have to re-educate everyone who is using ComiXology now.
Right.
There's a system that people understand that they're used to, a fairly sizable audience. However, there's also great potential for expanding that audience. So I wonder if it's not going to be some kind of situation where there are basically two brand names for the same thing. Sort of for lack of a better comparison, because for some reason I have fast food on my brain, sort of a Hardee's Carl's Jr. Scenario, where different people in different regions know that company, which is basically the same, by two different names.
That makes sense. I think Amazon customers need this content to be put in front of them somehow. And if ComiXology is going to remain a distinct brand with a distinct platform, I just don't see how that's going to happen. Maybe they will fold the guided view technology into their Kindle apparatus, or maybe ComiXology's format will become another option on the buying page. Let's say you go to see, let's say just for sake of discussion, Edison Rex on Amazon. There's a book in print. Is there a Kindle for that? Let's say there is. It'll say Kindle, and then maybe there'll be, ComiXology for like iPad or whatever, something like that.
Or people could buy all those options at the same time.
That's what's going to be really exciting.
No, I want them to do that for Edison Rex. I want everybody to buy all the different options.
Well, of course. But that's the thing that that hasn't been able to happen before, is that now you can do stuff that has to do with digital and print together in the same place.
Here's another interesting thing, because as you mentioned before, Chris, Amazon already has an infrastructure for self-publishing prints. And now if what you guys do now with Edison Rex in particular is you publish exclusively through ComiXology, and then the print editions for customers who wish to buy their books on paper is outsourced to IDW, with a potential, there's a lot of potential for Amazon and ComiXology to intermingle in an interesting way. Maybe now creators of digital comics could simply avail themselves of Amazon's existing self-publishing schedule and cut out existing comic book publishers. So you go to the page and it says, and I'm just using Edison Rex as an example. You could buy Edison Rex digitally and buy the print from us, and then direct, and presumably that's more money in your pocket.
Well, actually, Matt and Allison, Chris, I'd love to hear you jump in on that. But, Kindle, when you use Amazon self-publishing tools, they do charge you an upload fee, and by the megabyte. So for comics, that could be quite a sizable amount. So actually, there's a lot of hidden charges built into Amazon's upload, KDP platform, which are not actually applicable to comics.
Yeah, I've done it both ways. I did one through the Kindle Direct that has sold in the maybe tens, maybe over the course of a bunch of years. The book that I did that did really well with them was actually through one of Amazon's imprints. But it's certainly a possibility. It's an interesting one. The advantage of digital creators, or monkey brain creators in particular, of partnering with existing publishers has been the outreach to the physical portion of the direct market. Those segments of the existing comics readership that prefer to have things in physical media. which would be sacrificed by going directly through Amazon, probably, because brick and mortar have tended to be very wary of supporting Amazon's print publishing endeavors. In fact, I don't think that my novel was carried in Barnes and Noble as a result of that. Yeah. But I've made more money on that book than I did on any book that was published traditionally. So who knows what happens next?
There's an interesting, what comic book retailers, what they might think about this is sort of interesting. There is a kind of accidental Trojan horse situation now that we discussed a little bit before you guys came on. Some comic book stores have been using ComiXology's retailer services.
Mm-hmm.
There's a pull list, they have a pull list feature that customers can use to, identify the books that they want to buy. And also there's a digital storefront that local comic book stores who have websites can use to sort of, very similar to the way Amazon offers digital storefronts for anybody with a website, to buy digital products so they get a cut, and ComiXology gets a cut. Now, Amazon's going to get that cut. So conceivably, you've got comic book stores selling digital comics with the ComiXology infrastructure that will now go to Amazon, the arch enemy of all physical retail stores of every type.
Well, I know you're being facetious, but I would take issue with that last bit a little bit, because there was some interesting comment. I rarely read the comments threads, but I was looking at, Allison, what site was it? Was it IO9 or somewhere, which normally has atrocious comments? There was a similar discussion that came up about Amazon and ComiXology, and a bunch of people who'd worked in book retail kind of weighed in, because the kind of received wisdom is that, like, oh, Amazon's responsible for the demise of Borders, or Amazon is, counter to brick and mortar. When in fact it's the business practices of the big box book retail that has been the arch nemesis of book retail. And then, in fact, the demise of Borders and the slow, sad dwindling of Barnes & Noble has actually led to a resurgence of independent bookstores.
Yeah, and the reality is that, once Borders went away, Barnes & Noble stopped ordering. And the reason that the book trade doesn't like Amazon as much is because they don't order in the numbers that the bookstores used to order in. Because they wait until they try to keep their warehouse stock as low as possible. So basically what you get is you don't have a big order or big pre-order number, but you actually don't have as many returns.
Yeah, so it's actually a more profitable deal.
It's a different way of the book trade had to basically adjust the way they do business.
But this idea of the digital storefronts is interesting, because it occurred to me for the first time as you're saying that, Andy, that like the possibility exists for individual people to set up digital storefronts for comics now, potentially in the future.
Right. If ComiXology could integrate Amazon's existing widget structure, or their, most people have a wish list on their blog, hoping that someone might buy something expensive for them. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, like, a review site conceivably could have links to purchase the favorably reviewed comics that would go through some sort of digital storefront that the review site would then. And I don't know if that raises ethical concerns. I don't know. But it's an interesting idea for individuals to be able to receive some sort of remuneration from recommending digital comics that people would like.
Well, that happens already because Amazon has a very robust and helpful what they call Amazon Associates program, which is a referral system that we allow at ComicsAlliance. We've allowed our freelancers to use to supplement their income that we pay them for their writing, and it's done. It's not a secret, and it's done in such a way where if it's germane to the discussion and people might want to catch up, just a simple link to the Amazon book could be inserted there, and so that money will go directly to the freelancer. And I wonder now if ComiXology purchases can become part of that referral system.
One issue that we haven't really brought up, one X factor, that being X factor number 25. No, one part of this that haven't been discussing is Apple. Apple's whole part of this, iTunes, because or the iOS store, because there's been a lot of theorizing that Amazon is going to go out of its way to cut Apple out of this, as it did in the Kindle store. And so we were talking about Amazon kind of stepping in as a new middleman, as far as retailers go. But if iTunes is removed from that equation, or Apple is removed from that equation, then you kind of just come up even. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no growth.
We're going to have to see some numbers to really be able to judge any of this. And I don't know how far along that is from happening. I don't know. Like it seems to me like the big changes would be coming not to the actual comics delivery system or the way that you read comics or anything like that, but to sort of the tangential side projects of ComiXology, like the retailer storefronts or something like, say, ComiXology Submit, which is ComiXology's sort of like creators or writers submitting their own Kindle books to self-publish on Amazon. It's ComiXology's system of that, where comics creators can submit a comic and then it'll be on ComiXology's store as a self-published comic on ComiXology. I think that's probably what's going to be affected by what Heidi was talking about with those upload fees, if anybody is affected by that. So to me, it seems like the biggest effects are not going to be to the central apparatus, but to kind of the things along on the side that may change drastically.
Well, like Amazon has their own devices, for example, which compete with Apple's iPad. Right. And I don't imagine, Heidi, you might know more about this, and actually Chris and Allison may too, because you might get this information through your deal. But I would imagine that most people who use ComiXology on tablets use it on the iPad and not on Kindle.
I do know the majority of the sales for ComiXology go through iTunes. Like almost all of them.
I mean, it seems like if Amazon really wanted to mess with Apple and drive more sales of their own devices and drive more customers to its Kindle store, if that is indeed where ComiXology will exist one day, it seems like a big risk because of how robust that iPad business is.
I'll tell you what they do now. The iOS, there are Kindle apps for iOS. You can get a Kindle app for your iPhone or your iPad. But when you go to buy something through the Kindle app on the iPad, you are not taken to, your purchase doesn't go through Apple. You're basically taken to a web browser,
right,
where you make your purchase. Then you are brought back into the Kindle app where you can read that purchase.
Yeah, and the Kindle is not as good the actual Kindle itself is just not as good a platform for reading comics. Even the Kindle Fire, the Color Kindle, I mean, it isn't, it is not set up in a way that's as perfect for reading comics as the iPad, I mean, I think that's one of the things that this development has been. I mean, one of the things that the iPad and those level tablets is really great at is reading comics, and that's something that I think Apple and Amazon noticed. I mean, the Kindle was set up to be a book reader; it wasn't set up to be a graphics delivery system. And sometimes I think, like, if we were sitting around like 5-6 years ago and spitballing and say, hey, guess what? Amazon's going to invest really huge in digital comics. I think we all would have stood up and cheered. We'd all have been, wow, Amazon likes comics, And now we're sitting here and, I mean, I agree with Chris and Allison. I mean, I think this is, I think net it is good in that way, in that we're moving into bigger companies taking an interest in comics in that way, but I mean, all that stuff is fraught with peril.
But what isn't in life, Heidi?
Yeah, very true. Adventure is opportunity.
Speaking of fraught with peril, the last question I had in my notes before we began is, what of the Dark Horse digital comics store? in light of this news. Dark Horse, for people who don't know, remains its own separate digital comics platform with separate pay structure, and does not have a ComiXology arrangement. It works on the web, it works on iOS, and frankly, it leaves something to be desired from the user experience. And if Amazon and ComiXology is opening up this, brave new world of digital comics customers, will Dark Horse have to capitulate finally and come to the party?
We've held for the longest time that, I think it's all additive, and if Dark Horse has spent a lot of time and effort and money developing their own app, but I think that they lose nothing by also being available elsewhere, and we've always thought that it's just a matter of time before they got to that place. If this sweetens the deal somehow, then so much the better. But I think that the people that enjoy using that Dark Horse app would continue to do so. But I think that there is an additional readership for digital comics that they're not getting to because they're not available through other means.
Dark Horse in particular is not a strong brand identity in the sense that DC and Marvel are also. Dark Horse offers a variety of different products, many of them creator-owned, many of them connected to licenses. So it's not like if you go see Avengers, you can go to the Marvel, app, because you have such a strong identification with brand and content. And the Marvel app, by the way, and the DC app and numerous others, I believe, also powered by ComiXology. So,
Right.
That's more money directly from publisher sales will go to Amazon.
I wonder if. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, DC signed a deal with Google Play this week. Everybody's been talking about Marvel wanting to set up their own app. They already have Marvel Unlimited, which is their own system. I mean, I think we're going to see more alternatives because of this. Some people.
Well, the point I was going to make was whether this in some way may put not so much Dark Horse's app, because they don't have any kind of working agreement with ComiXology, but publishers that do have a working agreement with ComiXology, if programs such as Image's completely DRM free digital comics, like its own kind of side digital comics sales wing, if Amazon might not step in and say, hey, no more of that.
Well, they can't. Yeah. They can't, because that would be in breach of the contract that DC has with ComiXology.
Well, it is Images.
Or Images, yeah. I mean, It basically, you have to look at every single agreement that's been made between these companies and ComiXology to know what they can and cannot do.
Right. And I think in almost all those instances, I would be willing to wager money. Those corporations have licensed non-exclusive deals.
Yes.
To ComiXology, and those would be then transferable to whatever business arrangement they have with Amazon, but they would remain non-exclusive, and there wouldn't be much that Amazon could do.
I don't see that you're going to see a lot of movement and things changing as far as the way things work right now for a number of years, because those contracts, I think that most of those contracts are on a term basis, and so until those agreements have to be renegotiated, not much is going to change as far as what kind of rights are licensed out.
But the mention of the publisher-centric storefronts that are managed by ComiXology, in reading comments, which again I did all week this week, I thought it was interesting how many times people thought that those publishers already had their own digital comics thing, just because it was branded that. Like, oh, well, DC's got their own digital thing, so who cares?
Not realizing that ComiXology actually built that.
Right.
And they're identical.
And that's something Amazon has been doing for years, is creating sort of pop-up storefronts for people who want to create e-commerce, systems on their blogs, on their websites. You can simply sign up for it. It's in many cases, it's as simple as embedding the Amazon store into your website with a sort of Flash plugin. And ComiXology did something very similarly, in principle, not technically, but in principle, with DC and Marvel and I believe IDW, and a number of other.
The IDW one is an interesting example because IDW had their own app that was completely separate, and they were not available through ComiXology. And then when they reached an agreement with ComiXology, it just ported everything over. And so basically, all of those customers brought their libraries with them, essentially, or they had access, they had digital licenses pre-existing for the versions of those things on ComiXology. And then their own app was replaced by a ComiXology backed one, I think. But it just occurred to me, Andy, that like Amazon, one of the things it's been doing, kind of not stealthily necessarily, but not super in the forefront, is Kickstarter backing.
Oh.
And I don't know that would be an interesting wrinkle here, because there's lots of really high profile comics projects that have been funded by Kickstarter.
Think about it, if you can integrate all of those different things together.
Because already digital fulfillment for Kickstarter backers has been something that ComiXology has been doing with us, and I'm sure with other people, at least since we launched Code Monkey Save World, the Greg Pak, Jonathan Colton project last year. But if the backing was integrated with the delivery, I don't know what that could mean. That could be really interesting.
Yeah.
For listeners who don't know, Kickstarter is highly affiliated with Amazon. All payments that go through Kickstarter go through Amazon payments.
Right.
Amazon is basically they facilitate the cashier, kind of like Square facilitates purchases at comic conventions you go to where you want to pay with a credit card and someone has it plugged into their phone or iPad, that kind of thing. Amazon plugs themselves into Kickstarter. Your credit card, debit will go through that and then into Kickstarter. And some Kickstarter projects raise millions of dollars.
So basically, it becomes a better consumer experience because it's all
in one place.
So much easier.
Yeah. I think it's. As I said before, you guys came on, it's no one has a problem shopping at Amazon. This is not unless you have some kind of, moral objection to certain of their business practices or whatever. But, for the average person, Amazon's where they go to buy almost everything, So I think the discoverability, the discoverability of all integrating all this, the potential is kind of mind-boggling.
I just do worry that about fragmentation, which was a problem in the early days of the music digital business, where you had so many different stores with proprietary formats, tied to devices, with exclusive add-ons and supplements, and different price structures, file structures. It was a real big problem, which is why in the download business, you only have now Amazon and iTunes for the most part, and everything else is a streaming alternative. Right now, the digital comics landscape, in my view, is very complicated and too expensive. There is the ComiXology apparatus, which is really robust and probably the closest we have to sort of an iTunes store equivalent, where it's almost a one-stop shop. Dark Horse is off on its own, despite having some of the best comics you can get. Archie has their own digital comics situation in addition to ComiXology. Image has their own DRM-free digital download in addition to ComiXology. I know I'm forgetting more.
Oh well, there's still iVerse. They have their iVerse, whole Comics Plus system that they do to libraries. There's Sequential, that is this standalone app for iPad that does graphic novels in their own kind of viewing method. So there are still alternatives out there.
There's also Gumroad, which is a way for independent creators to publish, self-publish things at a pay what you want structure.
And I just worry that this is, it's cool that there's so much stuff happening, but from the end user experience, I worry if this is a good thing or not. At least with Amazon Music and iTunes Music, those files can be, played in different in the different media players. There's a place to put all these things you buy, and right now we have a digital storefront landscape where you could have just one page of your iPhone could be like 7 or 8 different, comics apps for different products. And that, I worry, is going to be a barrier to new readers, because I already think that the sort of periodical direct market system that we have is a huge barrier to new readers. Now we're introducing a whole new technology aspect to it that requires even more study and even more understanding. I guess in a way I'm arguing for a monopoly.
So you want a digital diamond is what you want, Andy.
I suppose I want something very easy and affordable and secure is what I want. And I feel like it's the Wild West right now.
I think that the ebook market was there, not too long ago.
Yeah.
And what's been remarkable is watching the way in which, Kindle just kind of became the gold standard for ebooks. I know that there are other options out there still,
but they're just not. They've not.
But the ease of use, and honestly, all of the fretting and the hand wringing that goes on inside, whether it's the comics market now or the music field before about DRM, man, regular people don't care. Like, they just want the thing, and they want the thing as easily as they can get it and access it. And with Kindle, people by and large do not blink at the thought that they're just purchasing a digital license for this thing and not the actual thing itself. They just want to be able to read that book on their phone or their tablet or whatever, and they do in incredibly huge numbers.
Which, by the way, I saw yesterday that Amazon actually is developing their own phone.
Yeah.
Have y'all seen that news?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it's really interesting that with the acquisition of ComiXology and the development of their own phone, it all makes sense.
I also think it's worth noting that I think what you're talking about, Andy, sort of discounts the idea that content can be duplicated among all those apps. Dark Horse doesn't have an agreement with ComiXology, but they could.
Yeah.
And everything that Image publishes and has DRM free themselves, you can also buy on ComiXology. You can buy Sex Criminals just as easily on ComiXology as you can through Image's DRM free thing. So it's really just an option.
Can't, actually.
Well, that's not through iOS. You can buy it on the ComiXology website. But it's that thing where it's Chris brought up the notion of most people don't care about DRM. But those who do have an option to do that. Everybody else can still buy their stuff on ComiXology. I think for most people, ComiXology is the thing. It is synonymous with digital comics, as we've said. And all these other options are kind of for those people who, for whatever reason, have a moral obligation to DRM or have a moral obligation to Amazon. And I think it's worthwhile to have those options for people who, if somebody is of the belief that Amazon is sending mom and pop bookstores out of business, they have an option to buy their comics another way. But I think ComiXology is really it. I saw a comment that I thought was a little bit misguided, saying that Amazon is the new diamond, or Amazon has become digital diamond. And I think Amazon would have to not put up half its digital comics one week to be like diamond.
Yeah.
It is, I think, kind of the monopoly, and then there are just a few other options for people who want other options, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I mean, if everything was available in ComiXology, I'm totally fine with that. But I just worry that there is fragmentation and exclusivity problems. Like, I can't remember now, but I know for a while there were a couple of manga publishers who were not available in ComiXology, and this is not necessarily a philosophical, division between these parties. There are licensing agreements. I imagine that the reason IDW was off on its own for so long is because the vast majority of their popular stuff is tied to licensing, and a lot of those deals were probably made before the advent of digital comics and had to be sorted out. Like there's so much. This is just a view of mine in general that I take to comics, is that we have such an arcane system, just up and down, that I worry that in every dimension of it, the actual comics from page to page, the way they're distributed and sold, the way the business works, I'm constantly like concerned that this is just going to be too much for a normal human to come in and buy. So I do like a streamlined system, which is why I do hope that ComiXology will be integrated into Amazon in a very meaningful way and not merely just another thing they own.
I can't imagine that the publishing partners that exist now with ComiXology won't have some kind of say in how everything gets integrated, because nothing happens in a vacuum. I can't imagine that that's not going to be a conversation that we'll end up having at some point.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, these are all very good concerns. I mean, it's, hopefully onward and upwards. But I think, there's money to be made here, and that hasn't been lost. And I think the discoverability. I mean, I think that what you're talking about, Andy, with the fragmentation, I think that's a big problem. But I think just being able to find things is even more. Find things that you like, and I think that's what Amazon excels at. And I think I think that will be a boon to mankind.
I like ending on good for mankind. All right. Well, then I'd really like to thank all the people who joined me today. Heidi McDonald, where can the listeners find you and your amazing insights?
Well, I am every day on the beat, comicsbeat.com. I also can be found every other week or on PW Comics World's podcast, More to Come, which you will find at publishersweekly.com. And also my writing can be found there at PW Comics World, which is publishersweekly.com/comics. So find all of that there.
Chris Robertson, Allison Baker.
I am on the Twitters as Chris_Robertson, and that usually points to every place else I am on the internets, such as Tumblrs and elsewheres.
I'm also on the Twitters at Allison Type.
Just generally charming online.
And, monkeybraincomics.com.
Monkeybraincomics.com, where you can also...
Right.
Yeah, we're publishers.
Right. Monkeybraincomics.com.
Monkeybraincomics.com, where you can also find Copernicus Jones' Robot Detective, written by our own Matt D. Wilson. Matt, where else can people find you on the internet?
Issue 3 comes out this Wednesday, everybody. Go get it.
Via ComiXology.
That's right. Yes, you can find that. You can find me on Twitter at HighMindedMW. You can find me basically every day at ComicsAlliance. And also, I host a podcast of my own called War Rocket Ajax with Chris Sims. It's at warrocketajax.com every Monday. And clips go up every Friday or Saturday at ComicsAlliance, where we do our comics reviews. So listeners should be familiar, I'm sure.
And I'm Andy Corey, senior editor of ComicsAlliance.com, where I can be found. My filthy DNA is all over that site every single day. And on Twitter at Andy Corey. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.